Well,
Folks, as you come in, if you would please mute yourselves until invited to speak, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Everyone's in, Ellie, so far.
okay. So Michael, you want to tell me when to get started?
You can get started now.
Well, okay. Welcome, everybody. We're known for starting on time, and we're going to start on time. Welcome to the District 17 Democratic Club Forum for candidates for District 17 delegate. These are the three people who will be representing us in Annapolis. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ellie Shaw Belbly-Dia. I'm the chair of the District 17 Democratic Club. I want to say a quick shout out to our club board members. Maybe you can just raise your hand. There's Aileen, Debbie, Al, Scott, Dolly, Richard, Anna, Carl, and Steve Fisher is our ex officio member. Welcome to all the elected officials and candidates who are joining us or said they're joining us. Lorianne Sales is running for County Council at Large. Tom Hucker for County Council at Large. Sydney Katz is County Council District 3 member and running for re-election. John McCarthy said he would be joining us. He's the state's attorney running for re-election. Tom DeGonia is running for state's attorney. Maxwell Wee for sheriff. Kathleen Dumais is a circuit court judge and one of the sitting judges on the ballot. Marlene Pierre is a candidate for circuit court judge. Cheryl Kagan, our District 17 senator, will say a few words in a bit. We have several candidates who are running. You may not know this, but the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, MCDCC, this is an elected position. And we have several at-large members, people who are running to be at-large on the council, on the MCDCC. Tazeen Ahmad, Marco Rivera Oven, Andrew Soundry, Michael Tardif, and Peter Witzler. And you'll also be hearing in a bit from the people who are running for that position specifically for District 17. If I missed anyone or you didn't sign up, please write your name in the chat so people know that you're here. I want to say a special thank you to Michael Tardif, who is running the Zoom. Michael runs just about everything for the Montgomery County Democrats. And as I mentioned, he's also running for MCDCC at large. Our moderator for questions will be the wonderful Peter Witzler from District 39, and he is running for MCDCC at large. Al Rosen is one of our club board members, and he's going to be the timekeeper. Well, I do want to say hello to Jim Gilchrist. I don't think Jim is on he didn't sign up, but Jim Gilchrist, many of you know him. He is retiring from the House of Delegates. We wish him all the best in his next endeavors, whatever they are. I hope he's relaxing somewhere right now after the hectic session that you all just completed. Thank you, Jim, for many years of hard work in Annapolis. So here's our format for tonight. We're going to spend a few minutes hearing from the people who would like to represent District 17 at MCDCC, and then we're going to move on to the candidates for delegate. The Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, these are the people who keep the Democrats strong in Montgomery County. They make sure we have volunteers for our precincts. They make sure that the elections are fair and accurate. They keep voters informed. You will see their names on the ballot in July 19th, that's our primary. In District 17, you can vote for one female and one male. And in just a little moment, each of these candidates are going to have 1 minute to introduce themselves to you. Our timekeeper, Al, will say 15 seconds when you have 15 seconds left, and then he will call time. We're going to start with the female candidates and then the male candidates in alphabetical order. So first up is Gloria Aparicio. Gloria, take it away.
Thank you, Ellie. Buenas noches, good evening. My name is Gloria Aparicio. I live in Gatesburg for the past 28 years. I'm originally from Venezuela. I'm running for the Democratic Center Committee in District 17 to put my proven record on mobilizing grassroots efforts, fundraising, and engaging in activism to work for you. As one example, I spent a significant amount of time working on the census and at the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission. I am committed to advancing democratic principles and views by bringing together a diverse group of forward-thinking voters and those who have been disenfranchised from the process. Elect me and join me in engaging
15.
undecided voters and future candidates for the Democratic Party. Thank you for the opportunity and for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Very good.
Next up is Jennifer Guzman Hosey. Jennifer? You're
Evening,
next.
I'm Jennifer Guzman Hosey, your incumbent Central Committee member. Thank you, District 17, for electing me. It is an honor and privilege, and I'm missing each of you in person. Es un honor y un privilegio representar a la gente del Distrito 17. I got to Harvard by distinguishing myself, working hard for you, the voters, the constituents, the people. I was endorsed for Harvard by Congressman Jamie Raskin. I got to Harvard by distinguishing myself, working hard for you. My well-researched experience and carefully thought out decisions on the Central Committee expanded your rights in state and party governance. You know, I take pride in discussing each vote in detail with you. Contact me. My information is in the
15.
chat.
15.
Democracy cannot be taken for granted. It takes experience to protect our community and our country. I've contacted more than 2,000 constituents since the pandemic began and have amassed volunteers, precinct boundaries are fine. Yes.
Time. Very good.
Okay. What was that little bell there, Al? Was that a
That's
bell?
my
or
little
was-
bell. Yeah.
Let's not, I think we don't use the bell. Let's just use the time. Okay, next we move on to the male candidates. First in the alphabet is Matt Amon.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Matthew Amon here. First off, special thanks to everyone who spent the time putting this together. I know how hard you work. These are late evenings, and I just wanted to let you know I appreciate it. I'm running for this position because I think the Democratic Party needs to be laser focused on the life cycle that it's going to take in order to keep voters registered, engaged, and actually getting out there to vote. The things that I want to focus on when I'm on the Central Committee are first and foremost voter registration, consistent, energetic, all the time, get those voters registered. Second, issue engagement. Having a machine, having a good organization that doesn't have a message isn't going to get us anywhere. I want to be focused on the issue engagements. Finally, and probably most importantly, get out the vote. This party needs to be 100% focused on making sure that
15.
Democrats are elected come fall, because all of this work is going to be for naught unless we actually win. So get out the vote. So why me? A lot of important campaign experience, winning by less than 500 votes on one big national campaign. And I will work hard for you. I'm asking
Come
for your
out.
vote and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Next is James Metzler.
Hi, I'm Jim Metzler, and I've been active in Maryland politics for about 20 years, mostly in Baltimore County. We moved down to Gaithersburg at the beginning of COVID and have been getting more active in local groups. I started doing web and computer work for congressional and local campaigns and picked up skills in communication, precinct analysis, and voter targeting. I've served on the Baltimore County Central Committee, mostly working on communications, and built an online voter version of the voter file that members and volunteers could use to look up and tag voters. From there, my work led me to running the voter file for the Maryland State Party, and I led the transition to the Maryland van, now the NGP van, and I built voter turnout and performance models that were used in this coordinated campaign. After that, I was hired on by the Clintons' 2008 campaign to run their voter file and data ops for the Iowa and Nevada caucuses, which was pretty intense.
15.
But I continue to work with the local party, serving as a club officer and board member or in organizing and over the years. On this Central Committee, I want to use my data and voter file skills where I can, possibly working on fairs and events, and possibly serving as the committee secretary.
That's it.
Thank you, and I
Time.
appreciate your support.
Thank you so much. Jim
Alan, if
Metzler.
I can make a suggestion to
Yeah.
be a little
Michael.
bit quieter, you're scaring me. So you
Okay.
must be scaring the candidates.
You're talking to Al, right? Not
Yes,
me.
I am. Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah,
I'll tell him.
I think a quieter introduction would work. Okay. Last is Jason Spiegel, last of our candidates. Jason?
You're muted, Jason.
I got it.
Okay, good.
You're still,
Jason?
Jason, you're muted.
Okay, sorry, Michael, I thought you said you were going to fix it. Gaithersburg,
Alan, please restart the clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a Gaithersburg
Okay.
resident and have been active in Democratic campaigns at the national, state, and local levels. I'm a deputy director of the Maryland Democratic Party Veterans Leadership Council and represent Maryland on the Democratic National Committee Veterans and Military Families Council. I've been an advocate in Annapolis and worked in this session with Delegate Polakovich-Carr to secure passage of a bill supporting veterans. I've attended a number of Central Committee meetings, and I believe that the Central Committee can focus on involving groups not currently represented by clubs or caucuses, including organized labor, small business owners, and veterans. We should also include on the website a forceful and articulate statement of what
15.
Democrats stand for that is easy for new voters to find. I believe in reducing the role of money in politics and have pledged not to accept campaign contributions or spend more than $1,000. Thank you.
Great.
I'm out.
Thank you,
Sure.
Jason. Good. Perfect timing.
Perfect.
Kudos for perfect timing. Okay, well, thanks to all of you for stepping up to run. Best of luck to everyone. Now we're going to hand over the spotlight to Senator Cheryl Kagan to say hello. And Cheryl, you're there.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Thank you for tonight's event and for all you do for Rockville and Gaithersburg Democrats. I'm Cheryl Kagan. I hope you know that I am Senator for District 17, Rockville and Gaithersburg. We just adjourned and worked so closely and effectively with Delegates Kumar Barve and Julie Polakovich-Carr, as well as retiring delegate Jim Gilchrist. As you may know, I am Vice Chair of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. I hope all of you got my letter in the mail wrapping up my accomplishments and what we accomplished during the last 90 days. It's also on my website, cherylkagan.org. Virtually all the election bills that got passed, they're all emergency bills. They were all mine, and they will be in effect for the primary and general election this year. I continue to work on 911 issues. We've had 3 people die in our district when 911 has failed. I had 3 nonprofit bills pass the Senate unanimously. Unfortunately, they did not get out of the House, but I'll be working with our delegation to make sure they are enacted next year, as well as we passed laws on transparency and ethics reform. Tonight is about politics and not about policy, though, and so I appreciate the opportunity to say a quick hello. If you don't already subscribe to my YouTube channels, I have a podcast or vlog called Kibitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. And so check those out when you can, and follow me on social media, my Senator Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, and more. With that, I just want to mention I actually do have a Republican opponent who filed on the deadline. And so for that reason,
15.
thank you. Thanks, Al. For that reason, and because I am passionate about who we elect as our next governor, our next county executive, our delegation, and more, you will see me at the doors. You will see me in the community. I look forward to working with all of you, and hopefully continuing to serve you in the years to come. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for all your hard work. I don't know how you guys do it. I've been asked to encourage people, if your full name isn't under your picture, if you could be sure to say who you are. And we'd love to have video instead of just a dark picture if possible. Okay, now we're going to move on to what you all came for, which is the delegate race. We have 4 candidates and 3 of them will move on to the general election. We asked for questions in advance and we got a lot of questions, really excellent ones, broad. You'll see the nature of the questions. We won't have time to fit them all in. And of course, you don't know what's going to come up, but if you have a question for these candidates, look for their contact information in the chat and contact them directly. So our format, candidates will make introductory statements that are no more than 2 minutes each, followed by a series of questions, and it's going to be like a lightning round. Each question, 1 minute answers. We'll end with closing statements, again, no more than 2 minutes. And Al, the timekeeper, is going to let you know when there's 15 seconds and then time. So this will be pretty fast paced, not very original, but we're going to start in alphabetical order. And then with each question, we'll move forward in the alphabet. So now I'm going to be quiet, and our moderator for this section is Peter Witzler. Take it away, Peter.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here with us tonight. So why don't we go ahead and get started with opening statements. So as we said, we'll start in alphabetical order. So the first will be Mr. Kumar Barbe.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. It's been my great honor and pleasure to represent you in the Maryland House of Delegates for these 32 years. It's been a pleasure. I've worked with many delegates and many senators, and I have to tell you that the thing that I believe encapsulates my philosophy as a public elected official was a description that was made about me in the Baltimore Sun that described me as being a staunch but practical liberal. And I think that really very aptly describes who I am. Over the course of my career, I've had a chance to make tax laws more progressive. I've had a chance to encourage high technology businesses. I've had a chance to work with the labor community to improve the standing of working people in our state. And most recently, as the chairman of the Environment and Transportation Committee, it's been my great pleasure and honor to work with all of the stakeholders, to listen to you as my constituents, and most recently to pass a law, the Climate Solutions Act, which is being described by the National League of Conservation Voters as the strongest climate bill in the nation, the strongest. But I wasn't able to do that by myself. Of course, I had many fantastic colleagues to work with on my committee. I have, of course, Julie Polakovich-Carr, who's been a fantastic freshman member of our team and in our House. Jim Gilchrist was subcommittee chairman in my committee and has done a marvelous job. And I very much miss him now, and I know I will next year when we are all sworn in again. So I'll leave it there. I look forward to hearing from you, as I always do, and working together for our common progress.
Great, thank you, Mr. Barbe. So we'll go to Joe DiMaria for next.
Good evening, and thank you to the club for arranging this forum. I'm coming to you from my home office here in Rockville. I'm an activist, and many of you know me from District 17 club events as a precinct chair and a site captain in the 2020 election at the Executive Office Building. I want to start by saying that I support the delegates we have now. I think that Barbe, Gilchrist, and Polakovich-Carr have done a fine job of representing District 17 in the House of Delegates. And if Jim Gilchrist were not stepping down, I would not be running. Now, but being an activist doesn't pay the bills. I'm a diplomat by profession. And my slogan is, he understands. That's because we know things that we read about in books or people told us about, but we only understand things that we've experienced or we've done. I have 30 years of service, public service, and before that I was an educator. I'm still involved with education on a volunteer basis. But I have run government programs, so I know what works in the real world, not what ought to be. I've interpreted, implemented, and drafted laws. But more importantly, I understand how laws impact people's lives. As a consular officer in the Foreign Service, I've reunited or managed the unification of thousands of American families through the adjudication of immigrant visas. I've done as I've done throughout my career, I'll look out for working families. I have promoted human rights and democracy around the world, so protecting and promoting democracy is real to me. It's not an abstract idea. I will not only protect, but I'll advance democracy in Maryland, and not just voter rights, but worker rights and workplace democracy. That's what I
15.
bring. That's what I bring, and I welcome your support. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. Let's go to Ms. Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First of all, a big thank you to Ellie, Michael, Alan, and Peter for your organization of tonight's event. We so appreciate your efforts on behalf of the District 17 Democratic Club, not just tonight, but throughout the year. So I'm Julie Polakovich-Carr, and I have the pleasure of currently being one of your state delegates for Gaithersburg and Rockville. I was elected in 2018 and have really hit the ground running here in my freshman term. To date, 18 of the bills that I've sponsored have become law, and 3 more are sitting on the governor's desk currently awaiting his consideration. And although I've been active on a number of issues and policy topics, I'd say that my passion and a lot of my efforts really have been around pro-democracy election reforms and campaign finance reform, about making our tax code more progressive and more fair, especially by closing corporate tax loopholes, and by making our roads safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. Prior to my service in the House, I served 2 terms on the Rockville City Council. Professionally, I'm a scientist by training. I have a master's degree in biology, and I am one of the few scientists that serve in the state legislature. And I served actually for 10 years working in science policy at the federal level, first on Capitol Hill, and then for a national organization, the American Institute of Biological Sciences. Personally, I'm married. My husband, Eric, and I are a proud parent to a 7-year-old who is enrolled in MCPS in a public school. So with that, looking forward to tonight's conversation, and I'll keep this moving along here.
You got time.
Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, for opening remarks, will be Joe Vogel.
Well, good evening. It is so great to be here with all of you, and so good to see some friends on the screen. I want to thank Ellie Shaw-Balvidia and the rest of the D17 Democratic team for bringing us all together, but also for the important work that you do year-round. When I was 3 years old, my family immigrated to the United States, and we moved into a home right here in Rockville. And I've called this place my hometown ever since. When I was young, this community welcomed my immigrant family with open arms, and over the course of my life, this community has invested in me, providing remarkable opportunity. But for too many people in our community, their experience looks very different, and the opportunities I've been afforded throughout my life are absent, out of reach. That's why I've worked to advance progressive policies, why I started a nonprofit to help students who were falling behind, and it's why I'm running for delegate, to take on the injustice and the inequality, take on the affordability crisis and a stalling economy, build a community where no one gets left behind and everyone has the same opportunities I've been blessed to have. As your delegate, I'll bring a different perspective. I'll show up and be present, not just every 4 years when it's time to ask for your vote, but every single day. I'll be humble. I'll listen to you and I'll learn from you. And I'll collaborate with you to take on the challenges facing your businesses, your neighborhoods, and your schools. And I will work tirelessly to deliver results for you and your families. As I've been out there knocking on doors and holding meet and greets, listening to people from Rollins Park to Woodley Gardens, Old Town, King Farm, Lakelands, Kentlands, I've heard about your challenges. I've heard about your hopes for the future. I look forward to having a conversation on those challenges and how we can work together to solve them. And on July 19th, I hope to earn your vote.
15.
All right, candidates leaving space for their open remarks. Quite remarkable. We're going to move on to the question and answer period. So as Ellie mentioned,
excuse me, Peter, for a second. Alan, if I could ask a favor of you, if someone finishes before their time is up, it isn't necessary to call time. Thank you.
We're all learning as we go, Alan. Don't worry about it. We will move on to the question and answer here. So we're going to sort of rotate through the alphabet. So I'll read the question. If it's unclear or my mic cuts out, just let me know. I'm happy to reread it. The first question will go to Joe DiMaria as we stack through the order here. Maryland has had a challenging time with redistricting. especially with congressional boundaries. In 10 years, it'll come up again. So do you favor any change to the current way of dealing with redistricting? So again, first in this will be to Mr. Joe DiMaria.
Thank you. Gerrymandering is a problem. Goes on in every state, depending upon, and it goes one way or the other, depending upon which party has majority in the state legislature. And this is a classic case of game theory. There is no incentive to be the first state to change. There's no rational reason why Maryland would not do what Republican states are doing every 10 years. So it's a very difficult problem, but I think that everyone agrees that it's wrong. And there are rational ways to set up districts. They have a method in Canada where they use natural barriers like rivers and things like that, and they try to stay within jurisdiction so that legislative districts don't cross jurisdictions.
15.
With spatial technology, there are ways to approach this. They're just not being used, and no one has an incentive to be the first one to change, and that's unfortunate.
Thank you very much, Joe. So next up would be Julie.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think there's kind of two parts to this answer. So first of all, we did undergo redistricting this year. The courts challenged the congressional map, and we ended up adopting a new map. And I firmly stand behind the new map as it stands right now. I think it's a much cleaner map than what we have, in terms of congressional districts at this moment in Maryland. And it's really a big step forward, and it works for voters, and it makes the districts more competitive. I think the question might be getting at kind of the process of how do we draw these maps. And, even a few years ago, I would have said I was open-minded about pursuing, say, independent, citizen-driven commissions. But in fact, having seen how some of those commissions have played out in other states over the last year or so, I'm a little more skeptical about making changes to the process. I'm not saying it's a no, but I do have concerns given how the process went, including in Virginia, but in other places where I don't think people got the end result that they wanted in terms of how the transparency of the process or what the end result was. So, we have some time until the next set of
Great. Next up would be Joe Vogel.
Yeah, well, thank you for this question. And I've heard about this already on the campaign trail. I had a conversation, I don't know if she's on here today, with Sally Stoltz in her backyard about this a few months ago. And ultimately, this is a democracy issue, right? And you'll hear me talk a lot about democracy. It's a subject that I'm really passionate about. Less competitive districts are not good for our democracy, bottom line. I don't think that this is an issue that we can take on alone as a state. I ultimately think that we need federal action on this. So it's outside of the purview or the jurisdiction necessarily of just our General Assembly. But I'll advocate for federal action on this to make sure that we have a fair process across the country so that we aren't competing with red states to add more blue districts here. But I wanted to thank the delegates and all the other folks in the General Assembly that were able to get it done this legislative session amid all the turmoil.
Great, thank you, Mr. Barve.
Yeah, I think Joe DiMaria is actually correct. This is a problem of who wants to go first and what the best way is to structure a solution that works in a regional or national sense. I've long felt that the solution to this is for Maryland to reach out to neighboring states like Virginia and Pennsylvania, perhaps, to form a compact where we begin to implement a less partisan way of drawing up lines as long as other states join us. After doing that, other states might take the example. I think it's important for us to match ourselves to another state, perhaps that's more Republican, so that there's an evenness to the compact approach. And that's the way I think we can move forward on this, because I ultimately think we do ultimately have to solve this problem as a nation.
Great, thank you. And then so the next question will go to Ms. Polkovich-Carr first. So rent and housing prices are skyrocketing, locking many young families out of the housing market. So how would you address the high cost of housing?
It's a question and an issue I really care a lot about and have worked on both as a delegate and while I was on the city council. I mean, I think depending on what level of government you're talking about, there's different solutions, but at the state level, certainly there are a number of actions that the state can be taking to encourage more affordable housing and more market rate housing to be built in our jurisdiction. This past session, I sponsored a bill along with Senator Shelley Heddleman from Baltimore County to look at reuse of excess state-owned properties that could be suitable for affordable housing. That went through Chair Barbe's committee, and I was grateful for his help in passing that legislation. And that's really going to be helpful in terms of looking for new opportunities for building sites. That's often a limiting factor, but we know funding is also a big constraint. Thankfully, this legislative session, we really put record amounts of money in for affordable housing this session.
15.
I think close to $60 million in one-time funding included in this budget. So that'll be a big step forward in terms of helping to finance these programs across the state.
Great, thank you. So next up in the order would be Joe Vogel.
And look, as a young person, I'll say that this is an issue that uniquely especially affects young people. 71% of Marylanders under the age of 25 are rent burdened, right? So, and that the issue with buying housing is, an even greater issue for young people. So look, I think at the end of the day, we need more housing stock, we need more smart growth, and we need to continue bringing money from Annapolis to invest in these affordable housing programs. I'm glad that Delegate Plakovich-Carr has been a leader on that. So I'll continue to support those efforts. And I think this will also require collaboration with city council members and county council members. That's part of the reason why those relationships are so important and why I've been focused on building those relationships, because at the end of the day, zoning is going to be critical to our housing solutions.
Great, thank you. Next up would be Mr. Barbe.
Thank you. This is very important for my committee, and I was happy to work with Delegate Plakovich-Carr on her issue. But the bottom line is that in the state of Maryland, we have a shortage of 80,000 to 100,000 rental units. And that's the reason the rent is so high. It's supply and demand. And so over the course of this interim, I've put together a group of members from my committee to really do a deep dive into laws that we can pass, working with county governments to improve the quantity, increase the quantity of the housing stock. There are other very innovative ideas. The state of California passed a law at the state level that requires more accessory dwelling units in their state. And that is a proposal that we are going to consider very seriously. But at the end of the day, this is about supply and demand. We need to build 80 to 100,000 more rental units in our state, or nothing is going to be solved.
Thank you. And Mr. DiMaria.
Yes, this is a problem, and you see it as young people still live with their parents at a later and later age. Now, the state gives incentives and sometimes funds to developers, and I think that they can make a certain percentage of housing that's developed using state help affordable housing. I know that in Rockville, a certain percentage of the housing that's built has to be affordable housing on a project. Unfortunately, for example, in my neighborhood, the developers evade that. And I think it's important too that affordable housing be close to public transportation, particularly the metro, so that people don't have to have a car to get back and forth to work. So I encourage housing around the metro areas. It also impacts school funding and the availability to access the better schools if the more affluent districts have more affordable housing. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. So this next question, the first one will go to Mr. Vogel. If elected, will you sponsor and support legislation permitting a cognizant individual with a painful terminal condition to choose physician-assisted suicide?
Yes, and I've had these conversations already with folks, and I recognize the importance of this issue, especially for those who are terminally ill and don't have that right. So I am supportive of this. I have been for a while, and I will champion legislation, co-sponsor, sponsor, whatever we have to do to get this done for Maryland families.
Great, thank you. Mr. Barbe.
Yep, the answer is yes. I've been a supporter for years and years and years. It's long overdue.
Great. Mr. DiMaria.
Hello.
We got you. Go ahead.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes, sorry, Mr.
Oh,
DiMaria.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, physician-assisted suicide. I'm all for it. I think, unfortunately, in a certain sense, medical science has done us a disservice because most people died of infections where you would have a high fever and you would begin to drift off and hallucinate. And that was the way most people died. Where it's a very peaceful. I've had high fevers myself in the hospital, and you know, you get up to 104, and it's a very peaceful way to go. Instead, people die in, you know, horrible agony. I think people should have the choice of sort of hospice. I've got no problem with the use of strong narcotics to alleviate pain for people who are terminally ill, and for people to pick their own time. You know, I saw my father die, and you know, people know when it's their time when they're that sick.
Thank you. Ms. Polakovich-Carr.
Yes, I am supportive. Chairman Barbe and I voted for the legislation that was before the legislature several sessions ago. Unfortunately, there was not a path forward for that bill in the Senate, but hopefully in the new term, you know, changeover in both the chambers, there will be an opportunity for this bill to come back and to pass in the very near future. And I will vote for it again.
All right. Thanks, y'all. So this next question is a little bit more complicated because we've tried to phrase it in a way that's relevant for both incumbents and non-incumbents. So let's see. First in our order is going to be Mr. Barbe. So I'll give you the incumbent version. So please give an example of a difficult compromise you had to make on legislation. How did you decide the compromise was worth it?
Yeah, the way to make this decision is to always remember what the most important thing is and not compromise that. So, for example, many years ago, I passed the first law that gave HMO enrollees the right to see the physician of their choice. Now, there are lots of other terrific things in the bill, but I ended up having to give those things away in order to keep the core concept of allowing a patient, an enrollee, to pick their physician. In the next couple of years, I got all of those things that I had to give away at the bargaining table, but you have to know what the most important thing is and go for that and not compromise on that.
Great, thank you. And then so the next one is for Mr. DiMaria. So for a non-incumbent, slightly different, but what compromises might you accept on an issue of importance to you? Name an issue you support, but would be willing to forego, or name an issue you oppose, but would be willing to accept in order to achieve a broader goal, and why?
I am not a great admirer of Ronald Reagan. In fact, he's one of my least favorite presidents. However, he had a rule that an 80-20 rule. He said the majority should expect to get 80% of what they want, and the minority will get 20% of what they want, and you can both claim victory. And in a legislature, in democracy, it's all about compromise. It's all about making deals. There's nothing wrong with making deals. That's the way the system is set up. And I think the entrenched partisanship, as we see way too often now, of party line votes over and over again, it's a bad sign for our democracy. One thing that I would compromise on, I may have to compromise on, I would like not to.
15.
In recent years, there have been legislation in Maryland that excluded certain workers in certain industries. That's unfair, that's wrong. But I realized that that had to be done in order to get the legislation passed. And I totally expect that I'll be in situations like that myself.
Time.
Great, thank you. So Ms. Polakovich-Carr.
Yes, well, I would say that our work in Annapolis really is a team sport. It's not about what any one of us as individual lawmakers want to do. It's about, working with your colleagues. And so I feel like most of my bills, most people's bills end up changing as they move through the House and Senate. And that's just, a reasonable expectation for any of us at the beginning of each session as we work on our legislation. I think probably my work on tax policy has been where at times I've struggled a little bit more, especially as I try to decide how far to go when introducing a bill. And often I'm negotiating with myself in terms of what to include or not include. But a good example would be my work to reform the enterprise zone tax credit. This is a program that's more than 40 years old and is actually one of the most expensive economic development programs in the state. And I've sponsored bills for the last 3 years. And ultimately, this last year worked with local stakeholders from across the state to try to come up with a compromise bill. It wasn't what any of us exactly wanted, but I felt like it was a good consensus product. In the end, it was amended down, but it did get to the governor's desk and we're waiting for his decision.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Joe Vogel.
Yeah, look, I haven't even been elected yet. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I'm already going to compromise on, right? I understand the policy process. I know that once you get to Annapolis, the reality will require you to collaborate with folks, to seek agreement where necessary to get things done. I will say this, here's what I'm not going to compromise on, right? My campaign has not taken money from corporations, not taken money from corporate PACs, and not taking money from lobbyists. If I compromise, it'll be because I want to get things done, not because I have some lobbyist telling me that this is what they want me to do, or I have some corporate PAC or corporation telling me that they want me to do something different from what I'm doing. So my compromising will be on making sure that we get legislation across the finish line, but I will never compromise my values when it comes to fighting for the families of this district.
Great, thank you. So just a quick moderator point of privilege has come to my attention. I've unintentionally been playing a little fast and loose on honorifics and titles. I'm going to try to clean that up. The great thing about living in a state like Maryland is that our legislators become our friends, our candidates become our friends, and it's all one big happy family. So with apologies, but we have 2 Joes, so we can't just go by first name. But I know all of our delegates and all of our candidates always say, call them by their first name. I'm not a mister, that's my dad, right? As the old dad joke that I can make as a dad. So with that in mind, I'll move on to the next question, and that'll go to Mr. DiMaria, who will be up first. So it's a very popular topic around transportation, surprise, surprise. Do you support Governor Hogan's proposed widening of I-270 and I-495 with the construction of 4 toll lanes, 2 in each direction? If you are elected or re-elected, will you take steps to cancel the project? Or what actions would you take to prevent widening of the highway with toll lanes?
No and yes. No, I don't support it. And yes, I would take steps to end it. Now, I spent years commuting from Brockville into downtown DC, first by metro, combination of bus and metro, and later commuting with my wife on I-270. I was recently in Texas, in Houston, where they're paving over the whole state. They just keep building highways further out and with more and more lanes. You can hardly navigate all the lanes that they have. That's not a model for Maryland or for Montgomery County. We need to expand public transportation. For example, light rail going from the end of the Red Line into Gaithersburg and Germantown, expand MARC. But we do need to fix the American Legion Bridge. And it's a shame that the new governor in Virginia has canceled whatever agreement that the two governors had to modernize that bridge. Hopefully we can use infrastructure money for that. Thank you.
Great. And then so the next up would be Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
I've consistently opposed this project. I think it is going to end up costing taxpayers money out of our pockets. It is not good for climate change. It's not good for quality of life in our communities, and we should not be proceeding with it. You know, as a delegate, I've consistently voted for the reform legislation that's been on the table in prior sessions and signed on to letters to express opposition to this project. I'm certainly committing to oppose it going forward, looking for ways to be investing in public transit and other alternatives to address the traffic and, you know, invest in good working transportation systems in our area going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel.
No, I do not support the governor's plan to expand 270. It is a huge equity concern. We'd be creating toll lanes for the wealthy, and it is a huge environmental concern and a huge economic concern in this fact that, you know, we'd be indebting ourselves to a foreign company until I'm in my 60s, right? So I want us to not just talk about what we're against, though. I want us to talk about what we're for, which is historic investments using the federal infrastructure money, using our surplus that we have as a state right now to invest in the future of transit for our state, investing in two-way all day, every day MARC train access for Gaithersburg, investing in bus rapid transit, investing in bike lanes and safer streets for pedestrians. We should have a public transit system that will work not just today, but will work into the future. We have tried expanding the highway before and it didn't work. Why are we going to do it again?
Delegate Barbe.
I oppose the plan as well. And 3 years in a row, I led my committee to pass legislation to examine, slow down, and stop it. And unfortunately, for 3 years in a row, the Senate senior leadership made a decision not to pass any of the bills that I passed. I agree with all of my colleagues here. I believe we need to have more investment in rail. I believe we have to have all-day MARC trains service. I think we should seriously consider the monorail proposal that's been proposed by a consortium of independent investors. I think that we can't do what Houston, Texas has done. We cannot simply try to pave our way out of this solution. We have to have more rail transit, and it's got to happen as soon as possible.
Great, thank you all. Our next question, the first up will be Delegate Plakovich-Carr. How would you encourage job growth in Maryland?
Certainly been an important issue. We've seen how much so many Marylanders have struggled during the pandemic. You know, thankfully the broader economic climate in the country has washed here into Maryland, and certainly with future projected federal money coming into the state, that tends to really help our economy as well when we look to the past. You know, our big asset in our area is the biotech corridor. That really is the big strength for Montgomery County and what I look to as for future job growth. I'll say serving on the committee that looks at tax policy and often many of these economic development tax incentives, I tend to be a little bit skeptical about what the state can do in terms of tax credits and look more to what are we doing in terms of education and job training and ensuring that, you know, our local graduates are prepared for these good jobs in a growing sector, and how do we get them the skills that they need to be qualified for those positions?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Vogel.
Yeah, look, we can't talk about this issue in a vacuum, right? A strong economy requires good schools. It requires a strong transportation system. It requires sufficient supply of housing. So we're not just going to do this through tax credits. It's going to require us to take on the underlying challenges that are leading to our stalling economy here in Montgomery County. You know, one creative idea that I have is to build a climate innovation sector here to build off of the biotech industry. There are plenty of accelerators, plenty of startups working out of the University of Maryland that are leading the way on important climate issues and coming up with the solutions that we're going to need to fully electrify and fully decarbonize. I want us to bring some of those companies here that'll attract young people. It'll help revitalize our economy, and it'll also help our community have a net positive impact, not just here at home on addressing the climate crisis, but have a global impact on addressing the climate crisis.
Thank you. Sorry, Delegate Barbe, I cut myself off there.
Don't do that. All these answers are correct. The main bottleneck at this moment is transportation and really the readiness of the workforce for the jobs of the 21st century. One of the things we don't do well in the United States is training people who do not have the ambition to go to college. There are a lot of young people who don't want to get a degree in philosophy or literature. They want to get an apprenticeship to do a job that is available. Let me give you one example of failure that really informs me on this matter. Pepco has trouble filling jobs of line people. You know, these are people who go up electric poles and they get paid ultimately $100,000 a year, and they can't find enough people to fill those jobs. We need to do a better job of reaching out to young people in high school to show them these job pathways that we Americans have traditionally forgotten about.
And Mr. DiMaria.
I'll tell you how not to do it, and that's the Amazon way. I found it repulsive that Amazon played one state off of another for tax benefits. And this is a company that many years in a row didn't pay any federal taxes, then sends their founder into space for thrills. You want to give tax breaks to the landscaper who's got a pickup truck parked in his driveway and does his bookkeeping on the kitchen table at night after being in the hot sun. That's a business. They need breaks. As everyone else said, you know, education is very important. Transportation is very important. Let me just make 2 points. On apprenticeships, which I fully support, you know, it's not just for high school students. Apprenticeships have to serve veterans, the disabled, resettled refugees, and recently incarcerated persons also can all benefit from apprenticeships. And transportation, people, you know, younger people especially want to live near where they work. They don't want to have to drive to an office park out by the highway. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So our next question, the first one will be Mr. Vogel. So very important issue near and dear to me as a union member. 2 questions about labor rights. So the pandemic has brought the issue of workers' rights to the forefront. So what experience do the candidates have in working directly with organized labor on behalf of workers? What will you do as a state legislator to protect and expand labor rights in Maryland? And again, first up will be Mr. Vogel.
I appreciate this question, and I'm really excited that yesterday the first Starbucks, Maryland had its first Starbucks unionized. So we are making important progress on this issue. I will always stand in support of collective bargaining rights, of all union rights. Unions lift wages, they lift compensation. That's not just good for the quality of life of workers, it's good for our entire economy. So I look forward to continuing to support workers. I am grateful for the support that I've already been receiving from unions. I am so proud to have the endorsement of the Montgomery County Educators Association and hope to build on that and create a coalition of unions backing our campaign. Look, I've been showing up. A few months ago at this point, I was with union workers in Annapolis, advocating in support of paid family leave. And I will continue to stand with union workers to make sure that we make this a state that is more welcoming to unions, and a state where every single worker has their rights and their compensation protected.
Thank you. Delegate Barve.
Yeah, I've been a strong supporter of organized labor my entire career. And many of you know my wife, Maureen Quinn. She's a workers' comp commissioner. But what you may not know is that she was also an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland Global Campus. And she was one of the founding members of the SEIU section that sought to organize the workers at UMGC. And she's testified in Annapolis, and she and I are a package team on this. We believe in union rights. We are actually a union household, and I intend to continue that throughout my career.
Thank you. Mr. DiMaria.
Yeah, thank you. All Democrats say they support unions, but I'm a union member and I've run for union office myself. I've also been on the negotiating committee team for the labor chapter of 4 free trade agreements to ensure that our trade policy protects U.S. workers and doesn't undermine them. Worker rights is the focal point of my campaign and will be the focal point of my agenda. There's a lot to be done, And the first place I would start is, I find it appalling that state workers, public employees, have to get permission from the state legislature to unionize. I think we've got to put an end to that. And the first thing I will do in Annapolis is look into that, see why it happens, and how we can let them exercise their rights under the National Labor Relations Act to unionize if they want to. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Plavkovich-Carr.
Thank you. We certainly had a number of bills in the legislature in recent years that Delegate Barba and I have voted for to expand collective bargaining at a number of institutions of higher education in the state, as well as other worker rights issues. I certainly support all of those and look forward to continuing to lend my support on those issues. And I think part of the question was about examples of where we worked with unions, and actually the issue that I've worked most closely with a number of unions in the state on is around cleaning up our state's tax code, which might sound like an interesting collaboration, but whether unions are members are directly kind of have ties to the state, whether it's state workers, teachers, but also organized labor, just recognize that our current state's tax code is not serving the people of Maryland well, it's not serving unions well, it's not serving small businesses well, when corporations and the very wealthiest few pay a smaller share of their taxes than everyone else. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to work with a number of unions in the sessions to come to continue to work to clean up our tax code and to make it fairer.
Great, thank you. So we've got a few more questions on this sort of kitchen table issues, if you will. So, talking about workers' rights. The next one is around medical bills. So medical bills are the #1 reason Marylanders file for bankruptcy. #1 reason Marylanders file for bankruptcy. The Healthy Maryland Act is a comprehensive, universal, single-payer healthcare coverage program and a cost control system for the benefit of all residents in the state. So would you support the Healthy Maryland Act? Why or why not? And we're going back to the top of our order here. So to be Delegate Barbe up first.
Yeah, sure. Of course, I'd support that. But you need to understand that that's a politically very difficult thing to accomplish. So a lot of the elements of that are already Maryland law. For example, we have an all-payer system in the state of Maryland that does a lot of the price negotiation and regulation that a single payer would do. It's not as comprehensive as a good single payer plan, which I would support. But those are elements that we have had in the law for a very long time. And as a result, Maryland has never had the kind of price swings in health insurance that other states typically have had. And so the answer is yes, and I intend to work for it, but be aware that there are many elements that are fundamental to single payer that Maryland has already led the state on.
Thank you. Mr. DiMaria, next.
Thank you. Yes, I would support Healthy Maryland Act. We here in the United States have the best medical technology in the world. We have the best equipment, the best trained professionals, but we have a lousy healthcare delivery system. On any measure, any global measure, we rank in the 40th or 50th percentile on life expectancy and infant mortality. They're experimenting with things in California. We have to look at what's being done in other states to see what we may want to adopt here in Maryland. We're not on our own in this. There are many other states that are trying to address this issue. And, the states are laboratories for democracy. We have to watch what's going on in other states and see what works in other places and borrow ideas. I would support a single payer system, yes.
Thank you. Delegate Plavkovich-Carr.
Haven't seen the specifics of this legislation, but I'll say from what I've heard here, yes, would be supportive. We know that health coverage and medical care is such an important issue for every Marylander and for their families. And unfortunately, there are far too many people who are struggling to get access to care and to afford to pay that for that care. In recent years, we have made a little bit of headway in trying to reach some particular groups that have struggled traditionally in Maryland and nationally with getting coverage, including young adults, recent immigrants, and others. And actually just this past session, one of the bills that we passed is to provide coverage to all pregnant women and their babies, regardless of their immigration status. I'm really proud that we were able to do that here in Maryland. We need to keep looking for ways to move forward and to make sure
15.
that every Marylander has access to affordable and good quality healthcare.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel.
Look, I believe healthcare is a human right, and I agree with my colleagues in that we should pursue the Healthy Maryland Act, any effort to make healthcare universal in the state of Maryland. What I do also want to see us do, and Delegate Polakovich-Carr mentioned this, 70% of Marylanders who do not have health insurance qualify for federal programs, for federal assistance like Medicaid. We have to make it easier for them to get on that program, continue to build on the progress that we've made there. I'll just add two things as we're talking about healthcare. First, I really want to see us pass the bill next session to include all Marylanders, regardless of citizenship status, to get health coverage, to get insurance. We got close on that this last year, and that is, an issue of utmost importance to make sure that your health does not
15.
depend on whether or not you have citizenship. And let's also address the issue of mental health. Your health should not stop mattering if it's from the neck up. We have a mental health crisis in our state, and we need to make necessary investments to address that crisis.
All right, thank you. So again, continuing with sort of kitchen table issues, childcare. And then so the first responder here will be Mr. DiMaria. So access to quality and affordable childcare is a real challenge here in Montgomery County. Many families pay more for childcare than their mortgages. Beyond providing subsidies, what would you do to encourage more access and lower costs? Additionally, would you also be open to support for families that choose a stay-at-home caregiver?
Yes, the first thing, I think employers have to get involved in this, and I think they will, because they, with a 3.6% unemployment rate nationwide, they have to attract workers. They have to get workers into the workplace and out of the home. And so I think that you're going to see employers getting more involved, and there are things the state can do to encourage or incentivize that. I think, though, it's very important that we see these people who work in childcare and who work in elder care also as professionals who are very important to our families and to our loved ones. And I think that we've got to attract not only more people, but people with better credentials, and that would be through better compensation.
15.
And yeah, anything that we can do to attract more and better qualified people to these occupations would help greatly.
Thank you. Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you. Well, my family's experience is like so many others during the pandemic, in that my son was in nursery school in the spring of 2020, and his school closed because of the pandemic and didn't reopen. He spent most of his kindergarten year of school on the computer. And so that meant that I had to be around and to help with that. And I actually gave up my other outside employment outside of being a delegate in order to take care of him and to support him. And I know many other parents had to make that difficult decision as well in order to be there for their kids, because they didn't have a choice. They didn't have childcare. Coming out of the pandemic, we are definitely have seen exacerbations of the existing problems in this industry, in that there already was a shortage of providers, good quality providers, and affordable providers. They themselves are experiencing labor
15.
shortages because of the low pay. There are certainly things that the state should be doing. We did pass a package of childcare related bills this session to try to start to address some of these issues, but I think there is more work that needs to be done in the coming years.
Thank you. And Mr. Vogel.
Yeah, look, this is a really important matter, especially because of what we saw during the pandemic, which was a she-cession, right? Women were out of work. They were having trouble getting back to work, in part because of the challenges facing the childcare system and the huge cost burden associated with childcare. I've done work on this issue with Interfaith Works. I worked with them to do a holistic assessment of the challenges facing the state childcare scholarship program. I believe the system is deeply broken in that it is incredibly hard for working parents to access childcare scholarships if they are out of work. They have to apply for temporary cash assistance and go through numerous hurdles just to be able to get the scholarship to send their children to childcare, to be able to interview for jobs and get
15.
back to work. So I look forward to advocating for reforms to the SCCSP system and making sure that every single parent can afford to send their child to childcare here in Gaithersburg.
Thank you. Delegate Barbe.
Yeah, I agree with all of my colleagues here. And I will say that Delegate Plakovich-Carr and I were very happy to be able to vote for a law that's not exactly about childcare, but it was the Time to Care Act. It was a bill that will move us in the direction of allowing people to spend the first 12 weeks of their infant's life with them rather than having to go back to work immediately. I can't expand upon what the other people have said here, but I do want to make this note. You have changed the Constitution of the state of Maryland so that we in the legislature can move money around from project to project. In the past, we were limited by what the governor chose to fund in the budget. Now, Julie and I hopefully will get reelected, and one of my other two colleagues here will work together with our senator to see to it that more money is directed toward those kind of programs that have been really neglected for a very, very long time.
All right, thank you. As someone who testified or spoke at a rally rather in support of the Time to Care bill, thank you. Very proud to see that bill pass. So our next question is about gas and gas taxes. So continuing the theme on kitchen table, you know, the rent is too high, as we said earlier in the chat. Some would say the gas is too high as well. So why did Democrats not suspend the gas tax longer? And so I'm going to remind folks this question came from folks, and they're asking you to sort of go a little bit deeper here. So they're asking for a better answer that it would take away from transportation funds, especially when there is a $7.5 billion surplus. So again, why do we not suspend the gas tax longer? Something more detailed about than just transportation funds, and where is the $7.5 billion surplus? So first in the order here will be Delegate Plakovich-Carr.
Thank you. Yeah, so as a reminder, we did pass a 30-day gas tax holiday that did end about a week ago. Look, I think if you look at the viewpoint of a number of economists, including some pretty conservative economists about gas tax holidays, they aren't necessarily the most effective or targeted way to provide relief to people. We know people are struggling with a lot of expenses and with inflation in a number of areas, especially in terms of, you know, rent, groceries, gas, a number of things. And you know, I think as we continue to monitor what's going on and to think about future actions that the state may need to take, I personally would support more targeted relief. I think when we did things like sent direct checks to people as part of the Stimulus Act in the 2021 session, that was a very targeted action to low and middle income people who needed the most relief. And those are the kinds of actions that I'd be looking to for the future. You know, hopefully the inflation and the economy is going to be in a better situation by the time the next legislative session starts. But if it doesn't, that's the kind of actions that we should be taking.
Thank you. And Mr. Vogel.
Look, I'm not in office yet, so I can't speak to exactly why it was only a 30-day period. What I will say, though, is I agree with Delegate Plakovich-Carr that we need targeted relief for working families in our state. And, you know, I'll also say that we need long-term solutions to this problem, right? At the end of the day, a 30-day relief is just going to help working families for 30 days. We need to make long-term investments in our public transit system. One of the greatest things that I think we've done here in Montgomery County is make ride-on buses free. That's a huge lift for working families that rely on the bus. And ridership increased 57% after we got that done. So investing in public transit, creating a more affordable, accessible, reliable public transit system is going to help us ensure that working families can get to work, can get to baseball practice, can get to wherever they have to go without having to rely on single passenger vehicles. And, you know, at the end of the day, there's a lot more work to do on transportation. So that's what I'll champion in Annapolis.
Thank you. Delegate Barbe.
Yeah, I think Julie did a terrific job explaining the rationale behind that. I will also say that it was a compromise, and it's a negotiation between the governor, the House, and the Senate, and you don't always get exactly what you want. But I will say that and as to where the surplus is going, the vast majority of that surplus is going into the health and education sectors of the Maryland economy. A lot of that money is going into transportation, into the transportation sector of the Maryland economy. We hope to build a statewide rail network in our state to move people. And, you know, we also, through my committee, we passed the Clean Cars Act of 2022, which will give a tax subsidy to people who buy zero emission vehicles.
15.
And we really ought to, now that the technology is available to us, we need to aggressively move in the direction of going beyond gasoline. And so I'll leave it at that. It is a much more complex issue than can be addressed in 60 seconds, but there you go. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Mr. DiMaria.
Yes, gasoline prices fluctuate. They fluctuate perhaps more than other commodities. We see them go up and down over time. Other prices, once they go up, they stay high. Now, taxes make up a large part of the cost of gasoline, but we should remember that this was a temporary measure in response to a real emergency in the war in Ukraine. But it's not a long-term solution, nor should it be. In the long term, we've got to move toward more public transportation, more eco-friendly modes of transportation. Other drivers of inflation that I'm more concerned about, because they don't fluctuate, once they go up, they stay high, are housing, higher education, and healthcare. About the surplus,
15.
you know, everybody's talking about the surplus and they're all acting fat, happy, and stupid like it's going to last, they say 10 years, right? It's not going to last 10 years. Everybody's got their hand out already. I think our priorities should be, first of all, health, public health, and secondly, education. But the surplus isn't going to last forever. Don't plan for it.
Time.
All right, thank you. So we're running towards the end of our program, so we've got time for maybe 2.5, 3 questions left. Make sure we save some time for closing statements. So what I want to do is change topics a little bit here. I guess still sort of kitchen table. So we had a question on education. And then so first up here will be Mr. Vogel. So how would you return us to world-class education? Have we done enough with the Kirwan Commission legislation?
I'm having fun. I kind of want to stay here all night. Look, this is a critical issue. It's an issue that I organize with Strong Schools Maryland in support of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. The Kirwan Commission, right? It's going to bring record investment, phased in $3.8 billion to our schools. I want to make sure Montgomery County schools are getting their fair share of that funding. So we once again have the best schools in the country. As I've met with educators and students, I'll say that the greatest issue that I'm hearing is the mental health crisis in our schools, right? The ratio right now of counselors to students is 369 to 1, when the recommended ratio is 250 to 1, right? So we have this is due to a number of reasons, including a shortage of mental health providers. That's why I'm supportive of, and one of the first pieces of legislation that I want to champion is targeted student debt relief for mental health practitioners, so we can encourage more of them to take jobs in schools.
Thank you. Next up will be Delegate Barbe.
Yeah, I strongly support the blueprint. I think Maryland has traditionally had an education system among the 5 best in the nation, and Montgomery County and Howard County systems are traditionally the reason why we score so well. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't improve. There are a lot of improvements that we have to still undertake. We still have a bit of a crisis in expensive jurisdictions like Montgomery County in retaining the best teachers, in the less wealthy areas of the state in terms of teacher retention. And so that's something we really do have to focus on. And again, I want to touch upon the fact that, like much of America, we don't spend enough time really thinking about jobs for
15.
kids who don't want to go to college necessarily, or don't want to go to college immediately. And I think that's got to be more of an emphasis for us.
Thank you. Next up will be Mr. DiMaria.
Yes, my wife and I owe everything we have to our educations. We appreciate that. Education, not only, the benefits of education not only accrue to the individual, they accrue to society at large. There's a lot the state can do. When you have a system based on local school boards instead of a national or a state education system, you're naturally going to have great disparities between more affluent areas and working class areas. And there's a lot the state can do to level the playing field. And that's the role the state has. I fully support the blueprint. I support the community schools program. I think it's great because it's need-based. And I think we need more need-based programming. I'm against the Boost Scholarship because I think that what few resources we have for education have to go to public education, not just to benefit the talented few, but to benefit everyone. And I could speak a lot longer about education, but those are some highlights.
Thank you. And last, Miss Delegate, see, there we go. Gosh, sorry. So yeah, Julie and I have known each other since our kids played together on Maryville Park before she was even Councilwoman Polakovich Carr. So sorry, we go way back. I apologize.
No worries at all. Yeah, I'm a firm believer, strong believer in public school education. I myself attended public schools. My son is currently enrolled in a public school, and I truly believe that every student in Maryland should get a world-class education, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their family socioeconomic status or their race. And that really was the driving factor behind the Blueprint for Maryland's Future that we passed and overrode the veto on during this term. And it really is a visionary plan, now law, to try to reach that goal. I will say though, however, the planning behind that legislation really did happen before the pandemic. And so there are more recent factors that we need to be addressing and tackling. We know that far too many students really did experience a lot of learning loss during the pandemic, during their virtual education. As was mentioned, students are struggling with mental health issues. So we certainly have further challenges to tackle. I currently am serving on the House Education Subcommittee, on the Ways and Means Committee, and look forward to continuing to work with teachers and parents on those issues.
All right, so we've got one last question and then we'll move to closing remarks. So I've been given very strict guidance. We need to end on time. So I'm gonna go right to the question and then we'll move right into closing remarks. So the first up for this last question will be Delegate Barbe. How would you want someone to describe you at the end of your legislative career?
A staunch but practical liberal. I think that description of me in the Baltimore Sun is apt, and it's one that I'm very, very proud of. I guess I'm sort of and maybe this is a function of my age, I'm sort of a Kennedy Johnson liberal. I agreed with everything they did except for that Vietnam War. The fact of the matter is that we need to be a government and a people who use government to solve big problems. We need to, there was a time when Americans really felt a great pride in doing impossible things like going to the moon. Those were liberals who did that, practical liberals. And I really do want to think of myself as being cut from that piece of cloth.
Thank you. Mr. DiMaria.
Thank you. I had an old boss, Ambassador Wendy Chamberlain, who was a protege of his name forgets me. Anyway, she taught me always put people first, and that's how I want to be remembered. I always put people first. We all want the same thing, whether we're Democrat or Republican, rich, poor, black, white. We just want things to be a little easier for our kids than it was for us. And I would like to be remembered as someone who did that, who made things a little bit easier for families and for the next generation. It's a terrible feeling that you're worse off than your parents were and your kids will be worse off than you are. We've got to turn that around. We've got to make the Democratic Party the party of working people again. And that's what I hope to be remembered for.
Thank you. Delegate Polakovich Carr.
Thank you. Well, I would hope that if I'm, afforded the opportunity to serve another term, that my, I guess, hard-earned reputation in Annapolis is what it is now. I have worked very hard to earn the trust and respect of my colleagues in Annapolis, and take great delight in being considered one of the few people perhaps in Annapolis who reads everything, who really tries to outwork others in terms of putting in the effort and initiative on my bills. And I think I see the fruits of those labors. So hoping to continue to be seen that way and continue to be regarded as someone who is passionate and working on behalf of the people of Rockville and Gaithersburg.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel.
I want to be known as approachable, accessible, reliable. Whenever I knock on a door, whenever I go to meet and greet, I always give out my cell phone number. I only have one phone. It is my personal cell phone number, and I answer it any hour of the day. It's on. And that's the kind of delegate that I want to be. Someone that you can call when you have a problem and know that I'm going to answer. Someone that, if you have an emergency, if something comes up, you know that you can count on me to deliver for you. Someone that's present, someone that's in the community, someone that isn't just around when it's time to run for office, but someone that's showing up every single day. I had a conversation at a picnic last summer with someone that was really confused as to why someone that was running for office was already there when the election wasn't until next July or next November. And that's the kind of delegate that I want to be, someone that shows up every single day and works tirelessly to deliver results for you, because that is exactly what we need as we face the challenges of today.
All right, thank you. By my calculations, we have exactly enough time to close at 8:30 for 2-minute closing remarks. And we will be started off by Mr. DiMaria.
Sorry, I was muted there. Yes, thank you again for organizing this, and thanks everyone for your time this evening. The Democratic Party has to get back to bread and butter issues. We have to reestablish ourselves as the workers' party. That's why my campaign and my legislative agenda focuses on worker rights. It also focuses on education, public health and the environment, and public safety. We have to represent all the people. And these are issues which impact the quality of life for everyone. Our differences are interesting and diversity is our strength, but the ways in which we are the same are more numerous and more fundamental. Now, look at an election as a very long job interview. So treat this as if you're hiring for a position. Look for someone who has relevant experience. You're looking for someone who understands the challenges of being a public official and the responsibility to the citizens. I'm not a professional politician. I think it's everyone's duty to serve for a few years if they can. And I'm at a time in my life when I can. This is not a stepping stone to another office. I don't have a Friends of committee, which I can keep open and use to run for some other office in the future. This is the only elected office I will seek. I'm not on a journey, I'm ready to work. I'm ready to continue my 30 years of public service serving you in Annapolis. If you'd like to help with my campaign, there are various ways you can. Please give me a call. And thank you again very much.
Thank you. Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight and for all of the excellent questions. We covered a lot of ground, but if there is anything that we didn't cover or that couldn't cover well in 60 seconds, I'll leave my contact information in the chat so that you can reach out to me directly for follow-up. I'm humbly asking for another chance to continue to be your delegate in Annapolis. Simply put, I found the work to be incredibly rewarding, to work on behalf of the people of Gaithersburg and Rockville, and want to continue the work. Although I'm only serving my first term, I feel like I've hit the ground running, not just in terms of the number of bills that I've passed, but also being very active in the Transit Caucus, the Latino Caucus, and the Montgomery County House delegation, which I serve in leadership positions for all of those groups now. But being a delegate is first and foremost about serving residents. And on that front, I spend numerous hours every week corresponding directly with you and proactively reaching out to residents of the district through my email policy newsletter. Thinking ahead to the next term, I have a lot more ideas of bills and legislation that I want to pursue on how to improve our elections and reform our state's campaign finance laws, to make our tax code fairer for working families, to enhance public transit, and to protect consumers. And I hope I have the opportunity to continue my work on those issues. Delegate Barbe and I are supporting each other in this race, and assuming that we're successful, we look forward to serving with whomever the voters select for the third delegate seat for the district. So thank you all for your time and consideration, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Vogel.
I want to thank Delegate Blakovich-Carr, Mr. Di Maria, and Delegate Barbe for sharing the stage with me tonight and for this great conversation. Look, there's one issue that I don't think we touched on enough tonight, which is the stake of our democracy, right? And I know what's at stake here from the story of my family. My great-grandparents escaped fascism, escaped the Nazis, and were able to seek refuge in Uruguay. It's where my grandparents were born. It's where my parents were born. And over the course of their lives, they watched democracy in Uruguay collapse and a military dictatorship take over. I do not want to be the fourth generation in my family to watch democracy collapse. Now, what does that have to do with a run for delegate here in Maryland? Well, we have to show people that democracy works for them, that democratic governance can deliver for them, that elected officials are doing work for them. That's why I'm so committed to showing up every single day and being present, why I'm committed to listening, why I'm committed to showing people that government really does deliver for them and can deliver for them. So I'm going to be out there over the next 84 days, knocking on your doors, having meet and greets in your community. If you want to host one, let me know, because I'm committed to going all over and listening to everyone, and then going to Annapolis and getting things done for you. I'll say one last thing, which is we are running a people-powered campaign, and we are counting on people to step up and support us. So if you can make a contribution of whether it's $5 or $10, whatever it is, that is what is powering our movement. No corporations, no corporate PACs, no Annapolis lobbyists, just people. So please go to jovogel.org/donate to make a contribution or sign up to volunteer with our campaign. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Delegate Barbe.
Thank you very much to everybody who's organized this, Ellie especially. Thank you to my colleagues who are really incredibly gifted people. I especially want to tell you how honored I am to serve with Julie Blakovich-Carr. She has really made us and me proud as a delegate. It is great having a person with an incisive intellect and the ability to put people together and pass laws. During the course of my career, I've listened to my constituents, whether it's been on HMOs or climate change more recently. And as first the chairman of the House delegation from Montgomery County, as the Democratic majority leader, and now as the chairman of the Environment and Transportation Committee, I want to bring all those skills together to really empower the members of my committee and the members of my chamber and the entire government to solve the really gigantic problems that we have before us. I guess the most gigantic problem is climate change, and I'm very proud to have helped worked with a team of people to write the most powerful law in the United States of America. Gigantic problems that we have to take on as a team are most especially going to be housing and getting people the kind of wealth they need in this state so that they can advance their own personal financial interests, but also advance all of us together with them as well. And so I look forward to knocking on doors with Julie as I did 4 years ago, and as I've done many years in the past. I look forward to hearing from you. You can reach me by kumarbarbe@gmail.com. My website also coincidentally is kumarbarbe.com. And my phone number
15.
is 240-498-0209, which I will put in the chat right now. And I welcome hearing from you, because together as a team, we're going to accomplish these great things. I'm very confident and optimistic about our future.
Thank you. And I think that concludes this evening's forum. So I'd like to invite everybody to
Well,
take a...
what can I,
Oh,
I'm going to
sorry,
say one little, some extra thank you. Sorry, I didn't make
No.
it clear in my run of show, Peter. I just want to say a final word, thanking all of our candidates and Michael and Peter and Al. You all were so quick on your feet. I didn't think we could do 1-minute questions, but actually I think they worked out quite well. And we were able to get a lot of questions in. Very impressive answers to challenging questions. I hope I learned a lot about our candidates, and I hope that you all learned about them and helps you make your decision. And so now Peter and I can say, let's all unmute and give a round of applause and have a great rest of your evening. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Congrats,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. So great to see people.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good job.
Great job. Best of luck.
Good job.
Thanks a lot.
Yay.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
time. Woo.
Thank you, everybody.
Well done.
Good night.
Thank
Well done,
you.
folks.
Be well.
Congratulations.
Okay.